Madrid 2006. The world's most prestigious prize in mathematics is about to be awarded. It's the Fields Medal. In the audience sit the best mathematicians alive, people who have spent decades chasing proofs for problems that most of us cannot even understand. And one name is in everyone's mind: Grigori Perelman, a quiet mathematician from St. Petersburg who just solved one of the most difficult problems in mathematics, the Poincaré Conjecture. For hundreds of years, the problem had defeated the greatest minds in the field. And Perelman, he solved it. Tonight, he is supposed to walk onto the stage, accept the medal, and join a small group of legends who changed mathematics forever. But there is a problem. Perelman isn't there. He didn't miss his plane or he didn't miss the ceremony. He just refused to come. And what is even more striking is that 4 years later, he refused another prize, one of $1 million. In a world where most people chase fame and fortune, Perelman did something almost unthinkable. He walked away. Tonight, we will tell the story of the man who solved one of the greatest puzzles in modern mathematics and chose silence instead of glory. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Tech Stories, where we tell the most exciting stories on tech. Today we have a very fascinating story again about a mathematician and how he solved one of the most complex math problems in the world. And yet he was not looking for glory and fame. Hi Didi, how are you doing today?
Oh, I am so here for this one. A mathematician who accidentally becomes a legend while actively trying not to be a legend is basically the purest plot twist in all of science. Who are we talking about?
Yeah, we are talking about Grigori Perelman. And I was digging deep into the internet, trying to find the most exciting stories on tech and on science. And I found the story of Grigori and I thought, oh my goodness, I need to tell the story. This is amazing.
One of those names that feels like a myth until you realize, no, he is a real person who just quietly walked into the hardest room in mathematics and turned the lights on. He is the opposite of a self-promoter. Where to start?
Let's start from the beginning. We start from the very beginning and let's tell his story, because I think there's a lot we can learn from it and a lot of inspiration which we can draw from such a personality. Let's go.
Okay, let's roll it all the way back.
It is winter in St. Petersburg. In 1960s, it is still Soviet Union. In a gray apartment back in Leningrad, a boy grows up obsessed with pattern. His name is Grigori Perelman. The Soviet Union, at that time, you must imagine, mathematics was almost like an Olympic sport, where the government, they are looking for gifted students, and they were discovered early, trained intensely, and pushed towards competitions where national prestige was at stake. And Perelman fits perfectly into that system. He was quiet, focused, and calm.
Oh, that is a gorgeous opening. The gray Leningrad winter, and this kid seeing patterns like they are hidden doors. And yes, the Soviet math pipeline was basically a talent forge, like athletic training, but for proofs.
That's right, because at the age of 16, he was already extraordinary. He enters an international mathematical Olympiad, which is a competition only for mathematicians. It's the place where the world's most talented teenage mathematicians compete for medals. And Perelman, he achieves something extraordinary. He gets a perfect score in that international mathematical Olympiad. He made no any mistakes. At that point, when he won that competition, teachers noticed something unusual about him. He was not interested in applause or reputation. He was interested in something entirely different. He was just interested in understanding.
And that is the spine of the whole story right there. A perfect score, but zero hunger for the spotlight. He is not chasing the medal, he is chasing the why behind the problem. Like the solution is almost a side effect. And you can hear it in your phrasing. Teachers do not just notice talent, they notice temperament.
Yeah. So you see already how the thing shapes, and it makes us also to reflect which kind of personality this is, how strong his personality is focused on achieving something and not on this whole thing which comes around of it. He's very focused, very diligent. And of course, with all his talent and all his good performance in school, he got up and up further into this research area. And years later, he traveled to the United States and worked at places like the MIT and also at the University of California and University of Berkeley. And within the field of geometry, his reputation started to grow quickly. But then
Something strange happened. Okay, yes, this is where the story always tilts from inspiring to almost surreal. He is on this rocket ship track, elite institutions, serious recognition, the kind of career arc people would do anything for. And then the vibe shifts.
Yeah, the vibe shifts. He at the at the height of his career, when he's really like ascending into the career ladder in the most prestigious universities worldwide, he just leaves. He walks away and he returns to Russia. So now there is a lot of debate or thinking. There's no really a concrete or official documentation why he moved back into Russia. We are talking about the mid of 1990s, and the exact reason is only known from colleagues, interviews, or reports from other mathematicians who knew him very well. And reportedly, he disliked the competitive culture of Western academia. So the pressure to publish, to seek recognition, and always competing for funding and positions. Yeah, many mathematicians who met him said that he was really uninterested in career advancement, networking, or institutional prestige. And returning to St. Petersburg allowed him to work in a quieter environment at the Steklov Institute of Mathematics, where he could focus almost entirely on research.
Yes, and it lands like a thunderclap because it is the exact opposite of the usual genius narrative. Most people leverage MIT and Berkeley into more status, more grants, more applause. And he is like, no thanks, I would like silence and hard problems. The irony is brutal. The very system built to celebrate talent can be the thing that repels someone who only cares about truth.
Yeah. And here actually is the big irony of this story, because the decision that looked like a step backwards, because he's leaving a very prestigious institution, may actually have been the condition that allowed him to make this historic breakthrough, which would follow. That I think is really something that we can learn and we can take for us. I truly believe that some setbacks or change that is not always that next step which will give us the freedom that we need and the space that we need to reinvent ourselves, to make groundbreaking advancement. So it's something we can reflect, because I think everyone who is listening this have in one way or another has faced some setbacks, and you don't need to look at this as complete negative thing. Maybe you will open a whole bunch of opportunities which might come from having the space, creating the air which you need in order to reinvent, in order to progress. So he went back to St. Petersburg.
You're to the practical ingredient, space. Less noise, fewer games, more hours where the mind can actually hold a deep idea without being yanked away by status and deadlines. And in his case, that quiet was not an escape. It was like building a laboratory inside his own head. So now we are in St. Petersburg again.
Yeah, we are in St. Petersburg again. Now we are back to a small office at the Steklov Institute. And there, almost unnoticed, he begins thinking about a problem that has haunted mathematics for nearly a century.
Nearly a century. This is where you can feel the room get colder, because the stakes are not a prize. The stakes are a whole chunk of reality. The problem is the Poincaré Conjecture, a question about the shape of spaces, about when a three-dimensional world is really just a three-sphere in disguise.
We will now try to explain to you this mathematics problem, which is kind of mind-bending and it's difficult to imagine, but we will try to explain it in a way that you also can understand what's this problem about. Because the story of this problem begins actually in 1904. A French mathematician named Henri Poincaré asked a deceptively simple question. Imagine the surface of a ball, football, for example. Now take a rubber band and place it anywhere on the surface. Now, you could shrink that rubber band until it becomes a tiny point. Imagine that rubber band, you shrink it until it becomes only one single point. You can place this rubber band on any place of the surface of the sphere and it can always shrink into one single point. Why? Because the surface has no holes. No matter where the loop is, it always can contact the surface smoothly. Now, imagine a donut, which mathematicians call a torus. If you place now a rubber band around the hole, so you cannot shrink because you have the hole, right? The hole blocks it. But if you put a loop just on the side, it can shrink. And that tells us something important about the geometry. It tells us that the shape has a hole.
Yes, that rubber band test is the perfect mental image because it turns an insane abstract question into something you can almost do with your hands on a sphere. Every loop can slide and shrink to a point. No traps, no tunnels, nothing to get snagged on. On a donut, some loops get stuck because the hole is real, and the loop is basically confessing that the surface has a tunnel running through it. Now here is the mind-bending leap Poincaré made. He asked, if you move up a dimension into a three-dimensional space, and in that space every loop can still be shrunk down to a point, does that force the whole space to be the three-dimensional version of a sphere? Not a donut-like thing, not some knotted, weird universe, but the three-sphere in disguise. And that question sat there for decades.
Yeah, instead of the surface of the sphere or the surface of the donut, you're trying to move that rubber band in 3 dimensions so you can go into that object. And that's where things become really hard to visualize because the Poincaré conjecture asks something like, if you have a 3-dimensional space where every loop can shrink to a single point, does that mean that this space is basically a 3D sphere? Because in 2-dimension, mathematically, can imagine it. They could classify the space easily. You say sphere has no holes, a donut has one hole, or a pretzel has multiple holes. It's easy to imagine, easy to think about. But in 3-dimension, shapes can actually twist and fold in extremely complicated ways. And you might think that a space has no holes, but somewhere deep inside could be a strange tunnel that you cannot detect. So mathematicians need a rigorous way to prove that the space must be a sphere. And that proof resisted the best minds for almost 100 years.
A space can look smooth and harmless and still have topology doing sneaky things behind your back. And this is also why it became a holy grail problem. Because it is not just a puzzle, it is a classification rule. If it were true, it tells you, here is how to recognize the three-sphere just by this loop-shrinking property. No need to peer inside and map every tunnel by hand.
Yeah. Because for decades, the greatest mathematicians in the world attacked the problem and they failed. Careers were built around it, but the conjecture survived. No one really could solve it mathematically. And by the year of 2000, the Clay Mathematics Institute declares it is one of the Millennium Prize problems. So one problem which is so difficult that the Clay Mathematics Institute decides to give a prize for the mathematician who is able to solve it. And if you solve it, you will get $1 billion. And you must imagine that's the same price like for a Nobel Prize.
Yes, the million was the headline, but the real currency was your name welded into the foundations of math forever. It is the kind of bounty that turns a conjecture into a mountain with a flag on top. And suddenly everyone is climbing, slipping, leaving behind whole new tools on the slopes. And the delicious irony is that Perelman was basically the one person on Earth who did not seem to care about the flag the world is talking prizes and prestige.
Yeah, and I think this is another lesson which we can learn from this story is that what's the usage of solving such a difficult math problem? If you solve it and prove it mathematically that some space is a sphere, so what's the application? Many people might think, okay, why should I spend so much time on working on such a problem? But the implication of solving this kind of problem cannot be even estimated. We talked in a previous episode about the MP3 and how streaming servers became possible based on a very complex mathematics problem on frequency. And we talked about the transformation of Fourier and how he transformed from time domain into the frequency domain. And that had a profound implication almost a century later. And I think this here is going into the same direction. So you solve it now, and the consequences of this recognizing or what you will build upon this kind of mathematic models cannot be even imagined right now. Even for our work environment or what we do day by day, we can also sometimes think that many of the work which we do is useless, but you just cannot evaluate what will happen out from there.
Exactly. Pure math has this hilarious habit of looking like a useless brain game, right up until the day it becomes the language a future technology desperately needs. Nobody invents a theorem thinking, perfect, this will one day help compress audio. They do it because the structure is there and it is begging to be understood.
And then in the 1980s, actually a mathematician named Richard S. Hamilton developed a powerful new tool. It is called the Ricci flow. The Ricci flow treats geometry almost like heat. Imagine a crumpled shape slowly smoothing itself out over time. Curvature spreads and evens out. It becomes more and more like a sphere until you can morph the whole geometry into a sphere. Hamilton believed that this process could eventually reveal whether a complicated three-dimensional space is secretly just a sphere. But the method had a flaw, because the geometry can tear itself apart. And once that happened, the equation stopped behaving. And Hamilton can see the path forward, but he cannot finish it. And the conjecture remains unsolved until November 2002, when something unusual appears online. And that something unusual was not a conference announcement or something big in a journal, but it was a paper published in a research server called RXIV. And the title of this paper was The Entropy Formula for the Ricci Flow.
An anonymous-looking upload on a preprint server with a title that sounds almost harmless. And then it lands like a meteor because Perelman was about to use Ricci flow and this new entropy idea as the missing control knob, the thing that keeps the geometry from going off the rails when singularities form.
Over the next year, he uploads 3 papers. Together, they are 60 pages long. But inside them is something extraordinary.
Yes, 3 uploads, barely any pages, and somehow they carry the weight of a century of math anxiety. It's the most dramatic understatement in academia. And the notes quietly rewrite the map.
Perelman he introduced new methods to control the dangerous singularities that destroyed Hamilton's approach. And suddenly, the Ricci flow continues. The geometry evolves, and the structure of three-dimensional space begins to reveal itself. If the arguments are correct, the Poincaré Conjecture is solved.
Every loop can disappear. Donuts twist and holes remain, but spheres hold none within.
Experts around the world gather in seminars and workshops, line by line, page by page, they check the proof. The process takes years, and gradually a consensus emerges. Perelman's work doesn't just solve the Poincaré Conjecture, it also confirms a much larger theory proposed by William Thurston, the geometrization conjecture, a sweeping classification of three-dimensional space. A mathematical mystery that began in 1904 is finally closed.
No spotlight, no victory cry.
That's the arc right there. The twist is that the big heroic move is not some flashy final equation. It's building guardrails around singularities so the flow can keep going without losing the plot.
Then we come to that point in Madrid in August 2006, because at that moment the world's most prestigious mathematical award is about to be presented. It's the Fields Medal. The audience is filled with mathematicians who have spent decades studying Perelman's work, but one seat should be occupied, but it's empty. Perelman declined the award. He didn't want to be part of that. And years later, even more astonishingly, Clay Mathematics Institute officially confirms the proof and awards the $1 million prize. And once again, Perelman refuses. He is not interested in money or fame.
Every loop returns to one.
The loudest silence in the room. In a world built on applause, he basically said, "No thanks, keep the spotlight."
Yeah. Today, Perelman he lives quietly in St. Petersburg. He rarely gives interviews, he no longer publishes research. The man who solved one of the deepest problems in mathematics simply stepped away.
And that is such a satisfying, unsettling ending. Because it refuses the usual script, where the hero takes the stage and we all clap until our hands hurt. Perelman's version is almost brutally pure. The work is the point, not the ceremony around it, and it also forces the listener to sit with a weird question. If you remove the fame, the money, the myth-making, what's left is just this quiet human being who cared enough about truth to chase it for years, then walk away once it was done.
We always just want to do things if we get paid or if we get some recognition or something we want in exchange of our work, of our dedication. So why should I do that if I don't get anything in return? That's our mindset, how we work. And from this story, we can see that there are still people out there who do things just because it's meaningful for them. And the map of three-dimensional spaces is now clearer than it was 100 years ago. But the person who closed that chapter chose not to stand beside it. He decided to step away.
You're basically saying the real twist is not the proof. It's the mirror it holds up to the rest of us. We're trained to ask, what's in it for me? And he's a rare counterexample. Someone who treated meaning as the reward and treated prizes as noise. He didn't just solve a century-old problem. He rejected the century-old deal we all quietly make with success.
And maybe, just maybe, the real mystery of Grigori Perelman is not the mathematics, but the mindset. And if you like these strange and fascinating stories behind the world of technology and science, make sure to follow this podcast, recommend to someone who might also be interested in this kind of stories. And we will continue here to explore the hidden people, unlikely decisions, and surprising moments that shape technology around us. Thank you also for you, Didi, for being here moderating this podcast with me.
I'm right here with you, and I love this. The best tech stories are the ones that feel like a shared campfire, not a lecture. Thanks for listening, and wherever you are, keep chasing the beautiful questions, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, see you next time. Take care, and bye-bye.
In a quiet room in Leningrad snow, a boy traced shapes where few could go. No crowds, no fame, no grand parade, just silent worlds his mind had made. Numbers whispered, lines would bend, questions stretching without end. A century-old riddle in the air, waiting for someone who dared. 100 years of brilliant minds, circling truths they couldn't find. A loop that shrinks, a shape unseen, a mystery hidden in between. Every loop returns to one, every path comes undone. Through the curves of space and time, a silent proof, a quiet mind. No spotlight, no victory cry, no medals raised toward the sky. He solved the question history gave, then turned around and walked away. From Paris chalk in 1904, a question echoing evermore. What shape is space when all is clear? When every loop can disappear. Donuts twist and holes remain, but spheres hold none within their frame. Yet in 3 dimensions deep, truth was buried far beneath. Ricci flow like heat in stone, curves smoothing out the unknown. But singular storms would break the stream until one mind rewrote the scheme. Every loop returns to one, every path comes undone. Through the curves of space and time, a silent proof, a quiet mind. No spotlight, no victory cry, no medals raised toward the sky. He solved the question history gave, then turned around and walked away. A paper dropped into the night, 60 pages calm and light. No trumpet call, no grand display, just here's the proof, and that was all. Years of doubt and lines reviewed until the truth was slowly proved. A century's puzzle finally done, the sphere revealed to everyone. Every loop returns to one, every question comes undone. Through the geometry of space, a hidden order leaves its trace. But glory calls and he won't stay. No prize could make him change his way. Some chase fame their whole life through, he chased the truth, and that would do. In St. Petersburg, the winters fall. The world still waits to hear his call. But somewhere in the silent night, a solved equation sleeps in light.